This first parable is so important for us to understand. Jesus says we must understand it or we won't understand the others. So let's look at it in a fresh way. In Matthew, Jesus says people honor him with their mouth, but their hearts are far from him. He says they worship him in vain because they only listen to preachers who teach their own opinions and theories and not the gospel he says we must believe. Now, Jesus says whatever comes into us just goes through us and passes out of us. But the things that come out of our mouth, they come from inside our heart, and they can defile us. Now, he's talking about the heart, which controls the core issues of our lives. This is why Paul says in Hebrews that it's good that our hearts are established in God's grace, and not in diverse and strange doctrines of men. Now, we should never forget that the gospel was Paul's lifelong ministry. So what is being said here is that we should only allow the gospel to come into us, because it is what produces good things from us. Now, we're told much the same thing in Galatians. Paul says a man reaps what he sows. Now, we most often think of something being sown out from us, like things that we do or say. But if you keep reading, Paul is actually talking about what we allow to be sown into us. He says that what we sow into our flesh, which is our human desires, it does not produce good things. But if God's good gospel things are planted into our spirits, then this produces everything good in us. Paul means for us to let the gospel take deep root in our hearts. Now we're told, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What we think in our heart is what we're allowed to come into us. And Paul tells us to keep our fellowship in the gospel, so that comes into us. In this parable of the sower, if we let God plant his good gospel seed into us, then that is what we think and believe and what dominates us. Otherwise, Paul says we have 10,000 other instructors in Christ. If we listen to them and receive what they have to say, we are not begotten by the gospel of God, as Paul says in Corinthians. What we're told here is if we allow the gospel truth of Jesus to dominate us, this is because we trust him and we live in all of his gospel gifts and blessings and promises and favor and love and grace. Everything else good too. If we choose to allow other things into us, then there's no telling what's in our heart. It must be some strange doctrine preached by one of those 10,000 instructors who teach their own opinions. Paul says he was totally separated to the gospel. That means we should be too.